Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Alexy. I'm really happy to be able to talk with you today. I'm the interim director of IRWG, and IRWG is the Institute for Research on Women and Gender. I'm here with two wonderful colleagues, Rebecca Irvine and Heidi Bennett, who put this all together and are helping make it possible. So it's really, truly my pleasure to get to talk with you all today. I've got my chat open. Over the course of this presentation, I would prefer to be interrupted, basically. So if you have a question or a thought or a comment, please either unmute yourself and say something, or raise your digital hand, or if you have your camera on, raise your actual hand, or put it in the chat, and I think I'll be able to see it. But if I miss something, please let me know and help each other out. Help me if I'm missing something and identify that. So to get started, I'm going to ask that Rebecca share the land acknowledgement that she's prepared. Would you mind, Rebecca?
Sure. So, Buju, Rebecca Indígena Cause, Bawa Tengo Jibwe, Indonjaba, Ajijak, Indodam. On today, what is known as Orange Shirt Day in the US and Canada, it seems particularly important that we offer this land acknowledgement. We collectively acknowledge that the University of Michigan occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, also known as the Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples. In particular, the university resides on land ceded in the 1817 Treaty of Fort Meigs, when local tribes ceded portions of their land so that their children could be formally educated. We recognize, support, and advocate for the sovereignty of Michigan's 12 federally recognized Indian nations, for historic Indigenous communities in Michigan, for Indigenous individuals and communities who live here now, and for those who are forcibly removed from their homelands. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold the University of Michigan more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous peoples.
Thank you very much. And as you mentioned at the beginning, this does happen to be Orange Shirt Day, and I was wondering if you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit more about that.
Sure. So September 30th is intended to raise awareness about Indian residential school systems that still impact Native American communities, and to honor the children that were forced to attend. It's worth noting that Michigan was home to the longest running Indian residential school in the nation, located in Harbor Springs, and it operated until the 1980s. As a legacy of residential school survivors, I encourage you to learn more about the historic and intergenerational traumas associated with Indian boarding schools. Miigwech.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And just these are some of the images that you can get on t-shirts. And thank you again for this really important acknowledgement and recognition. So just to shift the subject a little bit, I wanted to start by talking about IRWG as an institute available here on campus. I'm actually coming to you right here from Lane Hall at the moment. And you are always welcome. Everyone is always welcome to stop by Lane Hall. We do have in-person hours now, or you can make an appointment. We're at the corner near Buffalo Wild Wings, which I heard someone yesterday describe as B-dubs, which made me laugh a lot. So you are welcome to stop by and meet us in person, or we could make a Zoom appointment at any time. So today what we're talking about, just a little history of IRWG. So it was established in 1995. It's very interdisciplinary, very much committed to interdisciplinary research, broadly inclusive, creative and performing arts, as well as humanities, social sciences, and sciences. We are deeply committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and belonging as well, and are thinking about that in basically everything we do. So we would be thrilled to get to work more with you. What do we do? It's a little bit strange. It can be a little bit confusing, especially for people who are new to campus. What is IRWG? Because we're not a department, right? So we host events and workshops related to gender and sexuality research. Hopefully you've seen some of those advertised. Just this last week, we had a wonderful event about the 4-row and this history of policies at the University of Michigan surrounding abortion and healthcare. We also do a lot of support for faculty, finding and securing funds on campus, which is what we'll talk about today, and also off-campus external grants and funding. We do have some modest funding available through IRWG, things that we call the SEED grant. So these are grants available to researchers of sort of all backgrounds, all fields, all disciplines who are interested in doing research on women and gender. We do also assist faculty with publishing book manuscripts, thinking about different steps. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. At the moment, we're administering a really terrific grant called the SOAR R25 grant that's focused on students who are interested in doing research about HIV/AIDS. And we can talk more about that if you think you know any undergraduate students, I should say, who are interested in that. We also do try to amplify achievements of our affiliated faculty. We have over 200 affiliated faculty, and people are involved at different levels and different degrees. We do our best to amplify good news, share publications. If you're in this category, or if you know someone who's in this category and you'd like to have things amplified, let us know. We would be thrilled to do that. We do this on social media. We do this in our newsletter. We have lots of different formats, and on the website, of course, too. We also do connect with other institutes, with other scholars beyond the University of Michigan. So there's a lot going on, but it can be a little bit hard to sort of figure out because we're not a department. We don't have faculty lines, for instance. So here's who we are. You see our wonderful administrative staff. Heidi and Rebecca are on this call today. And we have lots of different ways at IRWG that we can support your research. So you were welcome to make an appointment to talk with any one of us about funding opportunities beyond what we'll discuss today in this presentation. Rebecca Irvine especially is really wonderful at working with you on grant writing strategies, making plans for funding opportunities, but also writing the grants themselves, figuring out how to make an effective argument or shift an argument if you're maybe thinking about a different audience than you usually write for. We have brainstorming and grant writing workshops. We have a monthly write-in. So if you like to write either on Zoom with other people or in person with other people, I believe it's the second Friday of the month. Is that right, Rebecca? Okay. So in the first one, I wrote 1,400 words in 2 hours that I could keep. Which I don't know what that tells you about me, but that's a lot more words than I can usually keep. So it was very effective for me personally, and I heard positive things from other people too. So we have breakfast and we have a quiet, friendly, supportive writing environment if you're interested in that. And as I said before, we also, Rebecca especially, will provide feedback on written drafts of proposals and help connect you with other services. So lots of things that we offer here. And then today we'll be thinking really about internal funding at Michigan. Again, I would be happy to be interrupted. If you have a question, if you see something come in that I'm missing, please just unmute and flag it for me. So while we're talking about money, I did want to start by saying money is a tricky topic. I don't know if you've heard this, but I've certainly casually heard that Americans, for instance, are more comfortable talking about sex and sexuality than talking about money, which makes some sense to me. I don't know if it's true. I haven't really done the research to confirm that, but money can be a really touchy, emotionally, difficult topic. Money at any level, but certainly money when you think about research, right? Where money is not just, like what you need to buy supplies, research supplies. It's also a kind of validation, or it can feel like a kind of validation. It can feel like a valuing of your research or you as a person. And so therefore, it's of course emotionally fraught. I am not trying to trigger anyone right now. I'm actually trying to do the opposite and flag this as a potentially triggering topic. If that's something that you're feeling, first of all, of course, do what you need to do, step away, or share your thoughts in the chat, whatever would feel helpful to you. But also realize that this is something that is important to think about because it gives you space to do the work that you want to do and that you need to do for the kinds of accomplishments that you're looking for, that you're targeting. All right, so the money that we're talking about today is internal funding at the University of Michigan. We have other events in future months that I'll tell you about later where we're talking about external funding. But so we're talking about internal funding at the University of Michigan. External funding is hard. It's hard to figure out. It's hard to get. It's hard to write for. Internal funding is hard in a different way. It's hard because it's sort of amorphous. And like there are pots of money here, and some of them are really big. Like there's lots of money at the University of Michigan. I came immediately before this. I was at the University of Virginia. It feels like there's a lot more money available here, but it's also a little bit hard to find. It's confusing. They're weird rules. They're different categories. And so that's part of what we're trying to demystify. I should say that this presentation was developed by the former director, Anna Kirkland, specifically in response to a junior colleague saying to her how confusing this was and just sort of navigating all of this. And so I certainly hope you don't feel that way, but if you do, understand you're not the only one. I'm an associate professor in women's and gender studies, and I had to do sort of checking to make sure I was understanding everything last night to make sure I got this right, because it's still kind of confusing. So external or sponsored funds are things that come from, say, national agencies like the National Science Foundation or the Endowment for the Humanities, Robert Wood Johnson, et cetera. So when we talk about internal funding, there's money that you were recruited here with. So usually these are called startup funds. And of course, there can be a tremendous range in that amount, maybe depending on your department or depending on your field. There's also money that you're entitled to get as a faculty member at the University of Michigan. And mostly when in this presentation, I'm thinking about LSA. So I'm not trying to exclude anyone who isn't in that category. But when I built this presentation, that's what I was really thinking about. There's also money that you can apply for here, internal money, and money that's discretionary if you have a particular need and that money particularly fits it. And then, finally, there's also money for sort of specific things for specific categories. So the research money that comes automatically with your appointment, there are two terms that you might see on your sort of financial report. It's either BFI, which stands for Block Funding Initiative, or RESIN, Research Incentive Funds. So you could be getting this money from either source. Sometimes both of those letters are there, or both of those terms are there. In my experience, this is about $2,000 a year, usually re-upped sometime in September. If you're in multiple departments, you'll be getting some money from one department and some from the other, depending on your FTE split. So if you have a 50% split between two departments, you get 50% of this money from one and 50% of the other. You will see this like as a BFI code with a project grant code on your account. And there's also a short code. Short code is a term that you probably maybe already heard. It's one of those words that once you know it, it feels like it's regular English, but then you think about it and you think, no, this is not regular English. This is like Michigan vocabulary, right? So when when you're spending money and you're looking to get reimbursed, you use this particular short code. So it's just the account that you're drawing the money out of. So BFI funds or resin funds come in once a year and are usually used for things that they expire, right? They're more likely to expire. Maybe there are different rules in different departments, but for instance, I use this kind of money if I'm going to a conference. So this is something that I pull from this account. It's a sort of regular research expenses. Let me check and see any questions or thoughts so far. Okay, terrific. So the startup funds that you came in with, so this is one-time funding that came at the start of your time as an assistant professor or however you came into the University of Michigan. So this also, like all other money, it has a project code and a short code. My recommendation would be to think seriously about spending these funds first. This is money that will definitely has an expiration date. It might be you should be able to see the expiration date in your financial account that I believe is emailed to you once a month. And you want to spend this money because it will go away. If you don't spend it in a certain period of time, it will go away. So you want to spend it. This is also the moment where I would recommend you think about some question like, what do I need most to get ready for tenure? That's what these funds are supposed to be used for, is thinking about what you need to do the work you want and need to do to prepare for tenure. If you're past tenure, of course, you can think about it for the next round of promotion or whatever project. But those kinds of questions, I think, can really help situate what you want to be doing with this money. So things that you could do with this funding. I already said that I tend to use it for conference travel, or pre-COVID, I tended to use it for conference travel. You can use it for any research purpose, right? So RA in this case means research assistant. travel to conferences, registration fees for those conferences, which of course can be very expensive, books, equipment, technology. And technology is a bit of a tricky issue, right? Because technically speaking, if you buy any tech with this money, that piece of technology, say a computer or a hard drive, is actually owned by the University of Michigan, and they might at some point ask for it back. My recommendation would be not to spend these funds on the kinds of computer technology that we get every 4 years, right? So you can see the note at the bottom of this slide. Computers come out of departmental funds, so not your personal accounts, not even your research accounts, on a 4-year replacement cycle. So you get a kind of standard allocation. And if you want something beyond that, in terms of computer technology, you can certainly do that. You can certainly spend your funds, but I would check in with either your department chair or a mentor in the same field to make sure that you're not spending your own research funds or your personal money, right? We can talk about that too, on something that the university should pay for, right? That's something that you could get through another means. I have heard from other faculty how confusing it is. You probably should not, we recommend against going out and say buying yourself a computer or a laptop or something like that and then looking for reimbursement. It's better to go through the department if you want something like that. Any questions about tech? I know that this can be a little bit tricky and confusing. Okay. I also think, well, maybe it's too late. Like if you had questions about tech, that was in July and we're past that point now. So BFI funds, startup funds, none of it can be used for personal use or personal travel. I think you probably know that, but we'll just say it pretty clearly. But you can do things that might feel almost personal, like for instance, hiring a research assistant to organize Zotero, organize a bibliographic software for you, alphabetize your bookshelf. I imagine that many of us did these kinds of projects. I was a research assistant when I was a very clueless undergraduate, not at the University of Michigan. I remember doing these kinds of things and like thinking, why does this professor need me to do this? And now I understand why, because you're busy doing other things, right? So if it would be helpful, maybe you could throw in the chat something that you've thought about or had success paying a research assistant to do. I think sometimes it can be really helpful to just realize the possibilities there, that you can pay someone, a student, say, to alphabetize your bookshelf or to help you organize something or to go through files. Because I don't know about you, but certainly when I was an assistant professor, I tended to just like go at it alone and think, okay, I've been doing this. I know how to do this, right? I just finished graduate school and I'll just plug away. I'll just sort of like grit my way through it or hustle my way through it. And that's fine. There's nothing really wrong with that, but we do have space and we do have money to take some of that off your plate. Let me move the chat so I can see if you want to throw some ideas in about things that you have, either you've wanted to pay someone to do, something that you would rather not do yourself. I think that could be really helpful to hear from other people as well. So you cannot pay yourself more salary from the funds, which is officially a bummer. It would be nice if you could do that, but that's not what these funds are for. And yeah, let me move on unless there are any ideas about research. Does anybody have something that you paid a research assistant for that you were really excited to have someone else do for you? I'm just wondering. You can unmute or put it in the chat. I did pay someone to alphabetize my books one time, which was kind of amazing. It was just like magic. And then I know where everything is, right?
I have something not on a research assistant, but just another way to think about leveraging those funds. Depending on your startup package, it can feel like an insignificant amount, like it's not enough for you to do what you want it to do. And to think about how can you leverage that to then apply for external funding. So can you do enough to do proof of concept or collect some baseline data or something small that you can leverage to get more later? And I'm happy to have conversations if people have questions about that as well.
Rebecca, that's such a great point. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Yeah, because sometimes it can feel like, oh, I shouldn't pay someone else to do this. And it can also feel like, oh, what I need costs $50,000 and I've only got 8. What am I going to do? Thank you so much. That's such an excellent point. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so some important considerations for these BFI funds, these startup funds. These are flexible, so you can use them for different things, right? But as I said before, you want to spend those startup funds first and then spend the BFI down every year, because the startup funds will expire, right? You might also want to think about asking your department chair or a mentor, or maybe the associate chair if you have that in your department, for additional funds. But this is what's really maybe potentially surprising for some of you. You really do need to spend down the funds before you ask for more, right? Which is, when I think about it, kind of like the opposite model of what it is to be a responsible adult human in the world and have a private budget, which is like, oh, I'm going to squirrel this away for a rainy day, and I'm going to think about keeping this. And the responsible thing to do in that case, I mean, responsible in quotes, understand, right, is to save money and to prepare yourself for the future possibilities. And in this case, if you apply for money and then they say, well, how much do you have in your research accounts? And you have $35,000 sitting there, it actually might be a mark against you, right? Because they say, okay, well, please draw down your research funds first. So it looks like it's the same kind of thing, but it's actually a really different model for spending. Please understand, I do not want you to take away, the takeaway point from this presentation and this conversation is not like Allison Alexy tells me to spend all my money and go completely wild. That's not the point either. But to understand that you do want to spend down your funding so that you can have an even stronger justification when you apply for more, right? Whether that's internal funding or external funding. And also, to the point that Rebecca just made, spending down the money gives you some kind of research, data output, results, conclusions that you can say, look, I ran the pilot program for this amount of time, and now I want to be able to ask for more. Right now, I have even a stronger justification there too. So departments have different processes for giving out additional funds. So beyond your regular allotment, it can be possible to get more. If that's something that you're looking for, again, that probably requires you have spent everything you have. So it's a little bit of a riskier move because you can't be sure, maybe, but talk to people in your department. Maybe that's your chief ad, maybe that's your department chair, maybe that's a mentor, maybe that's a colleague. Certainly in the last few years, I haven't been able to spend all my BFI funds. I haven't been traveling very much. I certainly haven't been going to conferences. We did also have a spending freeze for some time here at the University of Michigan, as many of you might know. But so I know that I have not spent all of my money in this category, certainly for the last couple of years. So there is a website called eGIF, where you can search for additional funding opportunities on campus or at the University of Michigan. We will share these slides, I believe, immediately after this presentation. Okay, great. Thank you, Rebecca. So the links are all live, and you can follow this. You can also just do this on your own if you want. I personally am very entertained by this website because I went to college in the 90s, and this website still definitely looks like websites that were designed in the 90s to me. Like it takes me back nostalgically to when I was in college. It is not the most modern looking website, but it does have a lot of information. So you can do searches based on keywords. You can do searches based on different topics. Judy, I see you have a question here. Are there opportunities in eGIF for research commons? Do you mind unmuting and elaborating on what you're asking?
Sure. I wasn't sure if the opportunities that are in eGIF are also in Research Commons.
Oh, that's a good question. I think most of them are, but I can't be sure. So I can think more about it. But I tend to, when I'm looking for these kinds of opportunities, I tend to look at both, honestly. But maybe I'm overdoing it. My instinct is always to look and sort of like come at it from different directions. Have you had a similar experience, or what's your experience been like?
Well, I haven't done a lot of spot checking, but I tend to, when I'm talking to people about funding, I tend to direct them to Research Commons as the gateway for internal funding. So if I found out, for example, that, these opportunities that you're talking about are just in eGIF, I would want to be sure to direct people to eGIF also.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you for bringing it up. I would look at both personally, but I feel like the Research Commons, I was looking for something there maybe in August and I wasn't having good luck. And then I ended up finding something in eGIF. So that might have just been a one-off. It wasn't during the school year, so maybe it just wasn't caught up. But and I can add Research Commons here in the slide before we share it too, so that people can sort of cover all the bases. Thank you so much for thinking about that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
In
absolutely.
Research Commons, it just lists LSA eGIF and the link there. So it makes me think that they might not be updating it all the time if they're putting the link there as a kind of coverall.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I was just thinking, it feels like we're living in a patchwork, right? Where we're all trying really hard and there's like slightly out of date websites and there's up to date websites and there's just all these different opportunities and it can feel really swampy. It can feel really confusing. And also we're trying, I guess it doesn't ever feel like there's one place where you can go and then just sort of like check all the boxes and know that it's capturing everything. Judy, I don't know if that fits with the way you felt or the way you've experienced it, but that's certainly the way I've felt sometimes. I'm like, did I get everything? I think I tried, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I always just like to cover my bases, and I work with Paul Barrow in the library to try to help people use tools to find the funding, which is one reason why I'm here, so that I can hear, what you're talking about and where you're directing people to. So I'll let you know whatever, if anything changes in our approach. But normally I've always told people that the Research Commons is the core place to go. But I'll start, looking around and comparing.
Thank you. And thank you for being here. First of all, thank you for the work you're doing. And thank you for being part of this conversation. And
Thank
maybe we
you.
can coordinate so that we can coordinate more for the future as well, because I feel like we're all working at similar purposes, right? Sort of trying to provide support and like you said, cover all the bases. It's really nice to meet you. Thank you.
Yeah, you
here.
too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to finish the slide, we also wanted to flag that, it can be hard to figure out, especially in the first few times you're trying to do it, how to write a budget. So we are happy to consult with you about that, if that would ever be helpful, figuring out what a convincing budget is. Sometimes I think it also feels like sometimes people think that the budget is what's going to make or break a grant application. And I don't think that's usually the case, but we do want you to feel confident that you're turning in the strongest, most accurate budget you possibly can. So as a just sort of benchmark, if you're hiring a temporary research assistant, typically graduate students are paid between $23 and $30 an hour. And undergraduates are paid between $12 and $15 an hour. So if you're looking for a benchmark, and of course, I hire, my research is actually in Japan. So sometimes I need to hire research assistants who can speak or read Japanese because that's the materials that I'm working in. And then I hire them at a higher rate, right? Because they have skills that that they've spent a lot of time, figuring out, learning, and I want to reward that. And I want to make it clear how important that is. This is a slide that's entirely based on my own experience. So maybe it's just me, but I did have to have a kind of shift in mindset when I started working as an assistant professor, thinking about the parts of my research that I could possibly pay someone else to do. I'm a cultural anthropologist. It's kind of a one-person show in some ways, in terms of I don't work with a team. Usually I work with wonderful people in my field sites, but I'm doing the research on my own. And so thinking about like giving myself some space and time to think about what parts theoretically could I pay someone else to do, whether or not I wanted to pay someone else to do that, or whether I wanted to do it myself, that's a different story. But just thinking about the kind of mindset shift that I had to go through. Relatedly, and I'm sure some people in this room have already experienced this, it does take a particular kind of supervision and support to help work with a research assistant, right? So you can't just imagine that, this is me talking to my past self, you can't just imagine that someone can read your mind, right? And understands exactly what you want done or exactly how you want to come at some question or some puzzle or some problem. And so figuring out how to manage someone, if we can use that word, I don't mean that in a nasty way, I mean that in a kind way, how you can supervise supportively and effectively is also potentially a new skill for people stepping into this role. So if that's something you're working with or you're thinking about, we would also be happy to think that through with you, offer some strategies and potential options and solutions. All right, other pots of internal money. There is this, you have to log into the LSA faculty grants and awards page. For the next stage of your career, if you're an assistant professor now, we are thrilled that you will become an associate professor soon. And there is an LSA Associate Professor Support Fund specifically for people in that position. So these funds give you summer ninths. I think maybe you know this phrase, but this is also one of those sort of silly words that seems like English, but is actually maybe just local language. This is 1/9 of your base salary in addition to your salary. So it's designed to provide you funding for a summer, those 3 months. Or you could get sort of bought out or buy down, so you're teaching less potentially. We have a link here to explain what associate professor funds cover. Maybe some people in the room here now are thinking about applying for this. Maybe this is something that you could flag for in the future. There are also lots of organizations on campus. CEW Plus, they've changed the name, I'm sorry, they have a plus there now, I forgot to include it. UROP is undergraduate students you can get to work on a project with you. They are wonderful and very enthusiastic and really creative, and just thrilled to be able to do research with you. There's library funds, the Research Commons, Judy, that you had already mentioned. The Institute for the Humanities has funds to have a whole year in the Institute for Humanities, also a summer program as well. The advanced program offers a whole range of support funding for different needs, including things, as far as I understand, like childcare, not only like, so if you need to help for sort of emergency or temporary childcare because you have to go to a conference, for instance, advanced is something that an organization you can reach out to about that. And of course, we have IRWG's own funding programs, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. I also, any questions about this? This is a lot of information on one side. Let me pause for a second. Or comments, maybe not just questions. Okay. I was thinking of other pots of internal money to area centers, what used to be called area centers, or institutes like IRWG or the Frankel Institute. So I just pulled 2 examples here. The Center for Japanese Studies is where I spend a lot of my time, and they have been incredibly supportive. I actually ended up, when I was an assistant professor, I had a sabbatical, 1 semester sabbatical leave fully funded by the Center for Japanese Studies, which, as you can imagine, is like completely life-changing. Sabbaticals are really nice, the time, the space, the energy. There's also the Lieberthal Rogel Center for Chinese Studies. You can see my East Asian bias here. These are the first 2 that I thought of, but there are many institutes and centers on campus. If you already have connections with them, check out their funding pages, check out their resources tabs. If you don't, and you would like, if you're new on campus and you would like some help navigating options, please do not hesitate to reach out. We would be really happy to help you figure that out. To this point, the sabbatical experience, especially, time is money. One of the things that's nice about money is that it can buy you time. Time to think, time to write, time to have a little bit of space away from teaching. So I'd already mentioned it, but the Institute for the Humanities has a year-long fellowship. It's not additional money, but it is time away from teaching, and incredibly effective. I have not had one of these myself, but all the colleagues I know who have just love it and rave about what a sort of creative and effective year it can be for them. The Frankel Center for Judaic Studies also has a faculty fellowship. It's either 1 year or 1 term. The Michigan Humanities Award offers 1 semester off for scholarly activity leave. Again, so this is about reducing teaching in particular. And these are local, right? So we know that it's not equitable to assume that every scholar can go off, leave their home, leave their family, leave their care responsibilities behind, and go off to some fellowship or go off and do a year of research somewhere else, right? So these are opportunities that are here on campus for people who are wanting and needing to stay more local. And you can see here, there's a link of all other humanities awards too. Of course, if you can relocate, or you can relocate for 1 year, or if you and your family can relocate, right, all of those options. There are lots of external fellowships for time and money. So if you want to go and spend a year at the Princeton Institute, you can apply to do that, right? The note here is from the previous director who I believe did this one time, rented out her house, and then only after the fact learned that you have to pay taxes on the rent you got from renting out your house. So I think this is the little tiny font there is a little bit of a borderline traumatic learning experience that she went through. That wasn't my personal experience because I've never had this experience, but just as a flag, we do have legal services included in our benefits. It's an optional benefit. I think you pay, or I pay something like $8 a month to have access to, it's kind of like an HMO, but for legal questions. So you can get your will written basically for free if you use this particular service. And Anna was suggesting that you reach out to them if you're thinking about doing something like this, renting out your house. Consider using the legal services that we do have access to through our benefits. So of course, there are lots of considerations here. The timing, maybe you're wanting to combine it with other leaves. So you have, one sabbatical from one place, one sabbatical from another source, and then so you can get yourself a year. So equity or not, there are top-up funds that can be available. So if you get a grant, an external grant that doesn't quite cover the entirety of the cost of your salary, for instance, or your salary plus benefits, you can apply to the college, or you can maybe apply to the university for top-up funds to basically make it so that you have the same salary, even though you're working on an external grant, you have the same salary. There's also different classifications of time when you're off campus. So there's a category called scholarly activity leave or duty off campus, sabbatical, etc. So the terminology is not at all apparent or clear to me personally. And every single time I need to apply for any one of these, I almost literally have to Google or go and ask my chief admin because I just don't remember. These are not immediately apparent terms to me personally. One flag that's really important, and again, maybe you already know this, is that if you take a sabbatical leave, almost of any sort, the university will require that you teach for 1 full year before you leave the position. So for instance, if I took a sabbatical and got a job offer during that sabbatical, I wouldn't be able to take that position for 1 year, the new position for 1 year. I say this partially, was my experience. I came from the University of Virginia and I had just taken a sabbatical when I was in the middle of a sabbatical when I got the offer here. In that particular case, Michigan basically bought me out of the contract at the University of Virginia. So I was able to come here immediately. I don't know how typical that is. It was something that we were obviously concerned about, and it ended up working out. But there is, if you take a sabbatical, understand that there's a possibility the university will require you to come back and teach for a full year before you leave. I heard somebody unmuting. I don't know if that was an accident or you wanted to ask a question or make a comment. I'm having flashbacks to teaching online. My students, I have to tell you, my students were hilarious in the chat. So I don't know how your students were in the chat. My students were absolutely nuts. It was amazing and I loved it. That was my favorite part. Okay, so thinking about publication support, I just wanted to flag this as an option. You might want to think about working with a developmental editor. Some people do. A developmental editor is not an editor that is employed by a press, a university press, for instance. This is somebody who is maybe a freelance or part-time editor who can help you with writing strategies, like how do you actually write? How do you build it into your schedule when you have all these other responsibilities? Do you have particular writing habits? Are you dealing with writer's block of some sort, stress, anxiety around writing, which I just want to hesitate to add, very, very normal, very, very difficult, but also something that a lot of us deal with and struggle with. Or you could work with a developmental editor for preparing a specific article or a book proposal. If you're in a book field, a manuscript, either an article or a book manuscript or a grant application. Rebecca Irvine also has developmental editing training, and she can take on some of those projects as her very busy schedule allows, but so you can reach out to her. And if she doesn't have space or time, I'm sure she can make other recommendations. Is that right, Rebecca? Okay, wonderful, thank you. So I wanted to put in a little bit of a personal, I don't know, point here. I've been able to publish, I work in book fields, and I've been able to publish 2 books now through open access. So there is some really unusually wonderful local money, Michigan money, U of M money for open access books. So I wanted to flag this and plug this a little bit. There's a program called Tome that's really wonderful, paid for by partially through the provost office commitment. So the idea behind this program, as I understand it, is to try to make books open access in a way that articles have been open access, maybe for a little bit longer. Open access, of course, means freely available in digital form. So this is my book, and it is a book in the world, but it is also freely available as a PDF on the internet. It's published by the University of Chicago Press, so you can go to their page and they have this little link. The Tome grant gives the press a $15,000 subvention fee to publish the book as they were going to, so paperback, hardback, but then also to make a free e-version open access. So this is very local money. I've had a really wonderful experience with this program. I feel tremendously grateful that my book was able to be published through open access. And not every university has this. It's just a particular consortium of, I believe, about 15 schools. Paul, yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This is a fantastic program. U of M participates. One thing about it, you have to have a contract in hand before you approach them. So I would check out the website very carefully about the publishers, but make sure you have that contract before you approach Tome. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, that's a really important point. That's not an interruption at all. That's wonderful. Yes, so basically I did already have a contract, and then we had to renegotiate the contract to add this detail in. In that sense, it was sort of like another round of work, but it wasn't radically different than the experience I was having just trying to get my book published in general. Paul, am I missing anything? Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I
Okay.
just wanted to make sure people knew that they have a contract with a publisher in advance, because that's a key piece.
Absolutely, yes. So the other, I'm sorry, this is just about all the things I've done. I don't mean it like that. I've also been able to publish a different open access volume through a different organization. So I wanted to plug that as well. I'm really into open access, I think you could probably tell. So I published a co-edited volume with the University of Hawaii Press, and then that was chosen through Knowledge Unlatched. So to pick up on Paul's point just now, important point just now, this was also, the book was already going to be published. There was under contract. It was actually in production when we found out that Knowledge Unlatched had chosen it. And so in this case, there's another subvention that goes to the press, and then they make an open access version as well. So this is available, openly available. This is not like the Tome program, which is just something that is only available for people who work at certain schools. Okay, so a couple things to think about while you're thinking about funding, and then I'll try to wrap it up so we have time for questions and answers too. Really do try to spend down the money and spend it down in an order, making the different pots of money. So the kinds of money that will expire, or the kind of money that you can only use for certain projects or certain types of purchases. Think about that time horizon. You might be in an assistant professor level now, but look ahead to the next steps, right? Options that will become available or things that you might need as you're moving through your career. Think about the defined use costs, right? Or money that has defined use versus things that are more open. And think about, remember not to spend your money on your research money, or certainly not your personal money, on things that you could get funded, you could get bought directly by the university. Think about how you can match your needs with best timing to maximize the impact of your research. When do you need something so that you can prepare for, say, summer field work or time off during a sabbatical to work on something? And we're always happy to talk with you about this and strategize with you, but we'd also think that this might be something that a mentor in your field or in your department would really have great perspective on. You're always going to get asked for a budget. We can help you with that. If that feels like a stress point or a point of tension, absolutely reach out. And we had talked about this earlier, but unlike your family budget or your personal budget, spending money down effectively is actually a signal that you're even a better candidate for the next round of funding, right? So you're saying, look what I've done with this money. Look how much money I've spent. Look at the research output that I've had. Now, don't you want to fund me to the tune of, X thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars? So this money, God, I don't really want to anthropomorphize money, but this money wants to be spent. This money wants to be used to do things that's good for you and good for your research. So don't let it sit around and wait. That also, that's the whole system is designed for you to spend this money to do what you need to do. And if it feels hard or maybe embarrassing or weird to talk about it now, feel free to come and talk to me. I promise I will be more weird and embarrassing than you will ever feel. Don't worry. And I'm happy to strategize with you about how to do that, to get these conversations going to feel comfortable. Okay, so key people to help. I'm happy to talk. Here's my email address. Feel free to reach out. I have tons of time. I'm really, truly excited to meet people. I'm still so thrilled that people are with the present company excluded, people are three-dimensional again. I spent so much time on Zoom. It'd be nice to just meet people. So I'm happy to meet. You can also, as we've been talking about, your department chair or associate chair, chief administrator, particular mentors in your fields. You have probably one person or maybe a few people in shared services. You might not have a name for them, but there's a generic address. They are so smart and they really know what they're talking about. So it can be really helpful to just ask them questions. And sometimes the question is, who should I talk to about this, right? I'm not sure about this, not sure how to use this fund. Can I buy this, right? The person who approves your concur. So when you make, what's it called? When you turn in your receipts, right, and try to get reimbursement, the person who approves that is somebody that you can also talk to. You might have a grants administrator, depending on your department or depending on your location. For instance, through IRWG, this is a wonderful person named Angie Skelly, but we can help you find that person if you're not sure. And also Rebecca Irvine, who is here and wonderful, incredibly smart, knows a lot, has incredible suggestions and ideas. So you're welcome to reach out to her as well. So, this is our last slide, and you can contact us, my address and Rebecca's address. You can arrange a meeting with Rebecca. I believe this link goes directly to your schedule. Is that right, Rebecca? Okay, awesome. Thank you for setting that up. And then we'll have a couple more Money Talk seminars, one on October 21st, which is a Friday, same time, also on Zoom, talking about IRWG funding in particular. We have things called seed grants. We have a new publication support fund, and we have, I think that's it. We have a few other options as well. So we have a whole presentation to talk that through. If you're doing research on women and gender broadly conceived, we'd be happy to help support that. And then we have another presentation the next month, November 18th, also Friday. I believe it's at 2 p.m. I think that time might be wrong. I'm sorry, I didn't correct that. Working with foundations. So I'll correct that before I send out the slides. So you can always apply for a IRWG seed grant. The new application will be up, I believe, shortly on the website, and you can see the material that's there now. You can also always apply to become an IRWG affiliate if you're interested. There's no cost to that. I mean that in terms of money, and I certainly mean that in terms of time. It's entirely optional. And you can check that out on our website as well. Maybe you already are an affiliate. If you are, thank you so much. And let me stop there and see if there are any questions or comments. I think I'll stop the share too. Questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, frustrations? Oh, Audrey, I just saw your comment. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was so very nice of you. All right, well, I feel like maybe that's a sign that we all want to go outside. Are you all already outside? Oh my God, am I the only one inside? Rebecca and I, we're just the idiots inside. Everybody's out enjoying the beautiful day. Well, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Truly, thank you for being here. Thank you for considering this. And we are always happy to talk. Thank you, Jocelyn. Thanks, everyone. Let us know if you have questions. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.